All right, well, if we're live on Whova, I'll get us started. Hello, everyone. My name is Abby Wicks, and I'm the Electronic Resources Management Librarian at Duke University. First of all, thanks to everyone for the flexibility with rescheduling, especially to our presenters and to colleagues on the planning committee who figured out what was happening behind the scenes. I'll be the on-camera moderator for this session, and we appreciate you all for joining us for Introducing Open Cataloging Rules, the freely available cataloging code alternative to RDA. We'll have a question and answer period at the end, so please just add your questions in Whova so I can read them out loud after the presentation, and feel free to get started whenever you're ready, Denise and Faye.
Okay, thank you, Abby. I'll share my screen. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this presentation on the Open Rules for Cataloging project, the freely available cataloging code alternative to RDA. My name is Denise Soufi. I'm the metadata librarian for Middle Eastern languages and special collections at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I'm one of the co-leaders of this project.
And I'm Faye Leibowitz. I am retired from the University of Pittsburgh. I used to be the general languages catalog librarian there for many years.
Thanks, Faye. During today's presentation, we'll be focusing on 3 learning outcomes. Why is a project like Open Rules for Cataloging important and necessary? What are the project's vision, scope, and principles, and what element set has been developed so far? What are the project's future plans, and how can you participate? The first question you may be asking yourself is, why do we need yet another cataloging standard? I'm just finally getting a handle on RDA. And isn't RDA supposed to be the standard? The ORC project has 3 goals in mind: to reduce needless expense, to promote inclusion, and to facilitate data interoperability. A strong desire for open access runs deep in our profession. These include cataloging guidelines that are freely available, such as ISBD 2011, the LC Cataloging Manual, PCC recommendations, DAX, and DCRM RDA edition. For decades, catalogers have relied on the MARC format as an international standard for structuring data. And the Library of Congress is continuing in this vein with its BibFrame project. In general, the library community is moving away from closed standards to open and interoperable ones. Yet it's become more expensive than ever to access our cataloging instructions. In 1967, AACR cost $9.30, which is $77.56 in 2022. AACR2 in 2002 with the 2005 update cost $98. In 2022, the RDA toolkit costs anywhere from $167 to $197 per year per user. ORC intends to become a completely free, open access set of cataloging rules. An open access cataloging code encourages participation and promotes inclusion. It eliminates the paywall that can serve as a barrier for institutions lacking in funding. It facilitates transparency. Its availability promotes easy adoption of the rules. And it enables professional cooperation outside of legacy institutional power structures. Lastly, open access rules help to facilitate data interoperability. Being freely accessible, they can easily be adopted by content providers, thereby promoting better integration with the library catalog. And by creating rules that are less complicated and more streamlined and focused, our data can work better with different data services.
Okay, I will now share with you some general basic information about our project. The project was formed and initiated by Amber Billy of Bard College in 2019 as the Open Cataloging Rules. Under Amber's leadership, from August of that year until March 2020, members of the core committee, a small group of volunteers willing to take on the work of the project, formulated the vision, scope, principles, and element set. Due to the pandemic, no work was done on the project until it was revived by Denise in December 2020. I volunteered to co-lead the project with Denise. In 2021, the core committee determined which sources it would use to develop the cataloging rules and began developing a workflow. A publication platform was also chosen. In March 2022, the name was changed to Open Rules for Cataloging, ORC, to avoid confusion with the acronym Optical Character Recognition, or OCR. Our vision is to create a free and open set of cataloging guidelines. We hope that ORC will be useful to a wide audience, including library workers, but also vendors, metadata workers in private industry, or even perhaps individuals who want to catalog their private libraries. The scope of the project involves making a free and accessible resource, open access. We want to comply with ethical practices and best practices. We want it to be comprehensive and sensible guidelines and models that are inclusive to all communities. We want it to be compatible with other metadata environments. We're going to make it MARC-based, since MARC is probably going to be around for quite a while. We want to facilitate data exchange and reuse, and we want to make this system adaptable.
So now let's look at the principles of the project. ORC generally adheres to the IFLA Statement of International Cataloging Principles. In the slides that follow, we've added emphases which are starred and modifications in bold. The first IFLA principle rightly focuses on the convenience of the user. Data should be recorded in a way that is comprehensible to all types of users, from the general public to scholars, students, and librarians. In ORC, we are working to make our rules straightforward and conceptually transparent, while taking into consideration the needs of different types of users and libraries. One of the challenges with RDA is the use of terminology that reflects neither common usage nor even the cataloging tradition. Traditional cataloging terminology is generally retained in ORC. On this slide, you can see the ORC modification of the IFLA principle of representation. The importance of controlled forms of names is acknowledged and supported by ORC. As such, we do not seek to create new rules for authority work, but rather endorse any current and future standards. Accuracy is, of course, of prime importance in connecting users to resources. ORC plans to rely on transcription to record data, unless a different representation would be more helpful to users. ORC supports and includes data elements that facilitate access, contribute to the functioning of the catalog, and adequately describe and identify resources. ORC data elements are chosen on the basis of their relevance and for their ability to uniquely identify an entity. The rules in the ORC code will be formulated to be practical and easy to use. To fulfill this principle, we plan to provide ample examples accompanied by mark coding. As I previously mentioned, we support current rules for authority work. ORC will remain focused on bibliographic description, and as Faye will explain, is drawing on our shared cataloging tradition to create its rules. For this principle, we have made an important addition that serves to define the scope of our work. Our focus is on bibliographic resources as commonly encountered in public and academic libraries. Since extant free cataloging guides, such as the DCRM suite, are available for use in more complex cataloging, we do not intend to create rules for materials already covered by such guides. We hope that creating an open access cataloging code will help to facilitate interoperability, and we support the use of controlled vocabularies that can easily be translated. Data access comes under the purview of institutions. We are extending this principle by making the scaffolding for that data open access. We have included the Cataloging Code of Ethics in addition to the IFLA Code of Ethics in evaluating the accessibility of the ORC code. We intend to respect IFLA principles as far as possible in the ORC code, but recognize that there are instances where we may have to deviate from some of them in order to fulfill others of higher priority. We intend those infrequent deviations to be rational, not arbitrary.
I'll talk a little bit about the elements of the ORC. We decided to focus initially on non-rare monographs. And as Denise has mentioned before, there are already a lot of guidelines for other types of materials, such as rare books, and CONSER has developed a lot of free resources relating to serials. OLAC has published free documentation relating to audiovisual, three-dimensional objects, et cetera, et cetera. And our element set is based on PCC Core BibCo Standard Record and the ISBD 2011. You can see that the basic elements of bibliographic description are included in ORC. Initially, the basic simple rules will not include a lot of interpretation. As time goes on, we hope to incorporate examples and solicit input from our community. You see that we include the title and statement of responsibility, edition, imprint, material description, content, media, and carrier types, series, and additional notes. So it's the basic elements of a bibliographic description. Now talk a little about our current work. Basically, what our strategy is to compare rules and definitions across codes. The primary resources that we're looking at are rules for a dictionary catalog, ALA cataloging rules from 1908, rules for descriptive cataloging in the Library of Congress, 1949, AACR2, ISBD, RDA, Mac Elrod and Michael Gorman's MRIs, LCRIs, BibFrame definitions, and Dublin Core definitions. Our content platform is going to be GitHub with minimal mistakes. we definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we're comparing existing cataloging codes, some of which are in the public domain and some of which are copyrighted, to identify common trends and concepts. Whenever possible, we will use the exact text of a cataloging rule or definition from a public domain source as the ORC rule. If no usable pre-existing public domain rule can be found, we'll develop our own rule based on concepts expressed across resources. Here's an example of a spreadsheet that we complete in order to do this analysis and comparison. We have a team of volunteer catalogers that compare various resources, which are listed at the top of the spreadsheet, to come up with definitions and rules. In this example, you can see that we have shown the LCRIs, MRIs, rules for descriptive catalog in the Library of Congress, ORC, BibFrame definition, the ORC rule, the ORC definition. And I forgot to mention that the resource that we are focusing the most on in this comparison is the 1949 rules for descriptive catalog in the Library of Congress. We chose this resource because it's comprehensive and it mirrors contemporary practice to a large degree. Library of Congress standards have a high degree of confidence in the cataloging world. This resource is in public domain in the United States. Also, the 1949 LC cataloging rules were one of the fundamental resources used in the development of the original American edition of AACR in the 1960s. And you can also see, if you take a close look, okay, Denise actually uploaded our presentation to the conference website. So it's a little bit hard to see the actual text of the spreadsheet here. But if you take a look at it later, you can see that we have actually taken the exact text of, actually, we didn't take the exact text. We modified a BibFrame definition, and we modified a 1949 LC cataloging rules rule to come up with the ORC rule. I think in this case, we borrowed a rule that applies to serials and incorporated it into the rule for series and ORC. So if you get a chance to look at that a little closer, you'll see generally what our theory is. Okay, and then future directions for a project involve adding instructions for other types of materials which do not have freely available cataloging guidelines already, including mark coding examples so that catalogers do not have to look in separate places. Examples using other types of standards such as Dublin Core, mods, etc. may be added. In addition, we are hoping to make this a little more interactive and allowing catalogers to submit examples and ask questions and give us input. We also hope that catalogers will have the ability to order the rules in our platform by mark field or by other elements. Catalogers should be able to zero in on the rules applicable to the type of resources they are cataloging. And our goal is flexibility in the display and searching of our database. This is a totally volunteer project. So we definitely encourage anybody that shares our vision, has a little extra time, and would like to be involved in creating this resource to get in touch with us and help us. We have a website. We also have a Google group. And we are working on instructions, examples, and also a website. So if you want more information or you think you might want to help us, please get in touch with us. Here are our email addresses. So please get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise and Faye, for that interesting session. I particularly enjoyed hearing more about the commitment to accessibility and then building on existing codes as much as possible. So my colleague, Jen Ying, has been gathering your questions, or gathering questions and comments from Whova. So I'm going to pull up our document there. I wanted to let you know that there was some suspicion in the Whova chat that RDA demons got wind of an RDA alternative and shut down our session this morning. So who knows, maybe. And then we also had a comment in chat that someone who is a cataloger at a smaller library, they don't feel they can justify the cost of catalogers desktop, which I think is in line with a lot of the pricing things you mentioned. So they are interested in something affordable and frequently updated. So if there's anything more you can say about update frequency or just commenting more on that, I think the group would be interested.
I honestly don't know. We can't come up with a schedule for updating because we're still working on the original system. A lot of what happens will definitely be a result of how many people are willing to volunteer to help out on this. I feel that as long as people have something basic to use in an easy format, it might not even be as important to update it. That might sound heretical, but really people need a resource to use. Certainly if some new development, okay, for example, electronic resources were a game changer in terms of cataloging. It was just so different and such a huge change that cataloging rules had to accommodate that new format. So it did need, the cataloging rules had to be updated to accommodate that. As for books, books have been around for a long time, and the descriptive elements of a book haven't changed that much over time. So I'm not so sure we need constant updates relating to the cataloging of books. If people want willing to help do it, we can try to do that. Denise, do you have any ideas about that? Or
I think you covered that all very well, Faye. I completely agree with you when it comes to books. I don't foresee that we'll have many major updates. I can see we might have minor tweaks to things as people bring up different examples or they bring up problems that they come across that are not addressed by our rules. In terms of frequency, I think I agree with Faye. At this point we don't foresee how that is going to work because we're just trying to develop our initial publication of our rules. And when we get to that point and we get some feedback, I think we'll be able to come up with some sort of frequency or schedule to put out updates, that sort of thing. But as Faye said, it's going to depend a lot on how many people we have volunteering, because obviously the less volunteers we have, the more difficult it is to support that sort of thing. But we are hoping that once we have an initial publication, that the updates will be much easier than the actual process of developing the rules, which, as I'm sure you can all imagine, is not an easy process. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, it's certainly an enormous undertaking. That brings another question to my mind. You mentioned some materials that don't have pre-existing rules for description that you're considering for the future. I was curious, just some examples of those materials, since, as you mentioned, the books have kind of stayed the same for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I don't think we've really thought about that yet. We're just mainly focused now on books. Once we get past books, and like we mentioned, we're hoping that it'll be a little more interactive and people can let us know what they need. Because the goal of this project is to help catalogers get what they need. So if there's a demand for another format that isn't covered in other organizations' guidelines and rules, we'll prioritize that.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, just to kind of, start with what you have and then let the needs of the community determine what comes next. Let me keep looking in my document. We've got a question coming in hot that I'm gonna just give my colleague a chance to finish typing. Here we go. Can you talk about the process for getting to a published or final version of ORC, and what point will it be ready to go live?
Yes, I can talk a little bit about that. So as you saw, we're starting with spreadsheets in order to do comparisons from various cataloging codes. And the next step is going to be extracting the data that we need from those spreadsheets and putting them into a document where they could be further edited. And this part is something that I'm taking care of right now. The next step after that is going to be marking up that document to prepare it for publication on a website. And then it will be committed to our GitHub site. And from there, it will become a website. That last step, I cannot explain at the moment because I don't know how that's going to work. But I will say that the DCRM RDA Edition group graciously allowed us to clone their GitHub repository so that we can take advantage of all the work they did to get that they did to get their cataloging code up into a website. Now we will have some work to modify some of that for our needs, but this is going to be a learning process. And fortunately, we do have a member of our platform group who is involved in her library's IT, and she has extensive experience with GitHub. So the other two members of the group, including myself, are going to be relying a lot on her expertise to guide us with how to do that. And we'll be learning all about that and maybe becoming semi-experts. As for when it will go live, I cannot give you a date right now. As Faye has pointed out, they're still in the early stages of working on creating the rules. And then we will need to do some testing and make sure that our workflows are sound, make sure that everything looks good on the website. So it's still early stages for us to provide any kind of publication date. I am hoping, based on the experience from the DCRM group, that maybe we could see 18 months to 2 years. I know that sounds like a long time, but we are having to develop rules from scratch. sort of from scratch, but much more so than the DCRM group had when they started. And they gave us some information on how long it took them. So that's kind of my estimate. But again, it's a very, very rough estimate. We could get things up sooner than that, or it might take longer. Faye, do you want to say anything about that?
I really haven't been too involved in that process because the way our core committee is set up, some people are involved in the cataloging rules subcommittee and some people are involved in a platform subcommittee. I have been involved in the cataloging rules subcommittee, so that's sort of what I'm involved in, and Denise has been involved with the platform, so she is our expert in the platform.
Do you think the timeline that I gave sounds about right? Or
it sounds right. I'm feeling very optimistic though, based on the kind of spurt of activity we've had over the last few months. So I would probably go for the earlier date that you said, and hopefully sooner than that. But I'm just being optimistic, maybe. I don't know.
Well, we had a good question from a student. So they say, as an MLIS student, BibFrame was promoted as this wonderful linked data-oriented standard, better than RDA. How does or will ORC mirror and contrast with the operability of BibFrame?
Well, we use some BibFrame terminology in our definitions. We aren't really using the linked data part of it. We're using the terminology. I mean, this isn't really designed to be a linked data resource, although we will include that if we can at some point, but that's not the focus of it.
I think a lot of members of the group felt that they wanted to take BibFrame into account when BibFrame is actually being used by libraries. And right now it's still somewhat experimental. It's only being used by the Library of Congress. There are a few other institutions that are experimenting with it. But right now we just don't know how that's going to pan out. But we would like to stay flexible and open to future developments. So we're trying to work with the reality of that catalogers are in right now. And should that reality change, we are very open to making those additions to our cataloging code that would make it useful for something like BibFrame.
So that flexibility brings another question to mind. Let me go back to my document. I'm curious about the process of creating an open access resource. Would you tell us more about some of the challenges or opportunities in creating something open based on volunteer work?
Well, we have been trying to learn about copyright law, and we are not lawyers. However, we believe that the resources that we're going to eventually be using are public domain or have some type of open access license so that we can use them. I mean, it is complicated, and that is a very big consideration when you're publishing something. You just want to be sure that everything you do is legal. That's pretty much all I can say is we're trying very hard to make sure that everything conforms to open access restrictions and laws.
Yes, we did some research on this, and Faye was able to contact someone from University of Pittsburgh, correct, Faye? Yeah, who had some expertise in this, who could give us some guidance. And another thing that we tried to do is we contacted IFLA to find out if we could simply put up ISBD 2011. And the reason is that the PDF version is freely available now, although it is under copyright. And we thought that maybe from them we could get a permission to take those rules and put it into a website, and possibly add like some sort of like simplified interpretation of some of those rules to help catalogers who are not trying to catalog anything complicated. Unfortunately, we didn't hear back from them. So that's why we've started with the open access resources that we do have and things that are out of copyright. In terms of volunteers, I would say that the hard part is that people's jobs, the jobs change, and their workload changes. And so we do have people who come in and they might stay for 6 months or a year, and then after that they're no longer able to work with us. And so we've had a couple times where there haven't been many volunteers, but then we do get an influx of new people to help out, and we have not had much difficulty bringing people up to speed. So that has been going well. Right now we do have a really solid group of volunteers, both for the rules group and for the platform group. So we're really very grateful for that, because this work could not be done without all the people who are volunteering.
And the wonderful thing is our volunteers come from a wide variety of libraries. We have people from academic libraries, public libraries, vendors. So we're trying to make something that's going to be useful to everybody.
And also people who catalog a wide variety of materials in different languages. So that's we get a lot of good input from those different perspectives.
Well, that's great to hear. I think we're at the end of our session time now. So I just want to say thank you all so much again for sharing all of this really interesting work. And to the attendees, please stay tuned for more great content. All the sessions today are being recorded, and recordings and slides will be made available to registered attendees in the coming weeks. If you have more questions about the session, you can reach out to our wonderful speakers via email. So thanks to everyone attending, and thanks so much, Faye and Denise.
Thank you for having us.
Remember, our emails are posted, so if you want to volunteer, let us know.
I think you got a couple signups during the session. Thank you all so much. I'm going to have to close this room to reopen the next one, but thank you again for your patience and understanding. We just appreciate it so much. This is great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.